Maybe he would. Maybe he would. Matt Leffler joins us as well. Thanks so much, Isaiah, for that. Matt joins us now. We're going to talk a little bit about this Forward Air case with Omni Logistics and the merger that may or may not happen. Of course, it's tied up right now in a Tennessee court at this moment. And interesting angles is, of course, Tennessee law states that under certain pretenses, shareholders get a vote about acquisitions and so forth. And now this has been tied up, and now we're waiting for a judge to essentially write an opinion on that at this point. But right now, Matt, you got a chance to look at this yesterday in terms of how this could play out. Shareholders want to vote as to how this is going to go down. Lots of interesting intricacies to this. What's your initial feeling about when you saw this for the first time?
This is a fascinating case. So it's not every shareholder wants to have a vote. It's 3 shareholders specifically. So let's back up. Lance, Forward Air and Omni have made a deal. They want to get a deal put together. The board of directors for both organizations have said, yes, we approve this deal. We approve the structure. 3 shareholders, former employees most part, don't want this thing to happen. And they're saying, we need a voice. We want to have a say in this thing. And here's the reality, folks. They don't get a voice in this. Now, they filed for a temporary restraining order. That was granted. It was extended another 15 days. But ultimately, this deal is structured in such a way to comply with the laws of Tennessee. These are very sophisticated entities. Forward Air is a publicly traded corporation, and Omni's backed by some very sophisticated private equity interests. And this case, it just goes to show it doesn't pay off sometimes to be a minority shareholder in a big company.
The case that the plaintiffs are making here in terms of that, obviously they want to get a vote. They feel like they have an opinion. They feel like under Tennessee law, they have that luxury to them. What makes them not eligible, or at least in your opinion, what makes them not eligible to have this?
So the real fundamental thing is, what is the voting shares going to turn into when this is all said and done? And this deal is structured in such a way that Omni is only going to have a 20% say in what happens. And that 20% is exactly the threshold that the Tennessee law requires. It has to be 20% or under, and you don't need to have voters participate. Now, the challenge here, and this is what's so interesting about Omni and their backers like Ridgemont Equity Partners, these folks have put into place a pathway where ultimately they may get more voting shares, but that voting share block will be decided after this deal is done. And if ultimately they're not given the additional voting rights, they get a crazy dividend, 13% return, which is a really nice dividend if you can get it. So this is why this big fight is about. Is there's very small, like esoteric legal compliance. But I want your viewers to think of it this way. If you drive in a school zone, it's 20 miles an hour when school's in session. But if it's not in session, it's 35 miles an hour. It's Sunday. How fast can you go? This is what has happened. These are very sophisticated entities. This is kind of a last-ditch effort, I think, from these shareholders who kind of say, we want to say in what happens, but here's the deal. You probably don't get it. Now, ultimately, if this is carried on, this restraining order continues to stay in place, Forward Air is going to be losing millions of dollars ultimately in the fees of interest and all the other stuff they've had to do for filing with the SEC. And so I think that what they filed earlier this week when it comes to their disclosures to the SEC is that they believe this case is meritless. And after reading all the documents, I can't help but feel it probably is meritless. This is 3 shareholders who want to say in the deal, maybe over the next few days, there's a deal cut on the side with these guys. Maybe they get a say in terms of the negotiation happening with the litigation. But I feel that after reading the Tennessee statutes, I don't know that they have to get a right to vote on this thing.
So not to take a crack at your profession, but if you look at this particular situation, was this a way that, say, like your analogy, was this just a way for Forward Air to say, oh, let's just do the deal on Sunday? Because we get through a loophole that way.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's a loophole. I mean, you got to remember, these statutes are done by the legislative body of the state, passed by the governor of the state. So this is not like a loophole. It's just this is what the law is. And we as lawyers, we want to make sure that our clients understand the law, structure deals accordingly. And there's this part of the litigation they've talked about is, is a shell company or a subsidiary is going to take over some of the Forward Air stuff. Again, these are exemptions within the statute that say this is the case when we don't need to have shareholders participate. And again, the board of directors for both companies, which are responsible for their respective shareholders, looked at this deal, looked at the structure, probably negotiated this thing for months and said, this is in the best interest of our shareholders. But 3 disgruntled shareholders say, I don't want it. I want you to talk to me. And maybe this is one of the reasons why Omni is so interested in making the deal, because they have shareholders that are kind of unreasonable. But in terms of like what people should think about this, these types of deals are not rare. The structures of these deals are not rare. And the way this has been put together is probably how it happens in most states. Most states have laws very similar to how they protect minority shareholders and just shareholders generally. And this law, I believe, from after looking at everything, I think they've complied with this, not just the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. The reality that I think the shareholders from Ford are looking at is, hey, you're taking on a $1.85 billion debt in order for us to have this opportunity to now compete with some of our direct customers. And I think those shareholders from Ford are now thinking, I feel like this is going to jeopardize our relationships with our other customers. And it very well may. But the board of directors made a decision, a business decision in the interest of the company. And it's really hard to turn back time on that.
So looking at that as well, I mean, there's also another aspect of this in terms of the complaint being made, in that the shareholders say, of course, that this deal will dilute will dilute Forward Air shares considerably, and therefore shareholders should have a right to say at least whether or not this is going to go in one direction or the other, regardless of how this actually plays itself out. They should have a say in how that works. Do they have a play at all there?
Yeah, I think ultimately, if they really do at their core feel that they have been wronged, you might see shareholder derivative lawsuits where shareholders are suing the leadership team of Forward Air saying, hey, you broke a fiduciary duty. You did not maximize shareholder value. We all look at corporations and say, are they good stewards of the environment, or they're doing X and Y? The reality is, as a director of a publicly traded company, your job is to maximize shareholder value, minimize costs, maximize value, and you have guidance and protection of how you make those decisions. So at the end of the day, where there might be some dilution in terms of what's going to happen, that's absolutely going to be the case with any merger. When you're buying somebody and you're giving them equity, every existing shareholder is going to be diluted. That is just the nature of this. However, you have to have a business reason for why you're doing it. And I can't imagine the teams at Forward Air and Omni have not looked at this very, very carefully and said, this is going to be the long-term success of this business. We think this is the right move. This is a great environment for M&A. A lot of companies are struggling, so the values are kind of knocking down a little bit. And if you can get away from having to do big loans where you can actually just transfer shares, you avoid the interest rates. So again, like this litigation, ultimately, I don't think it stops the deal. I think maybe something gets cut in the side. But if the Forward Air shareholders, whether it's the three who have sued here or other shareholders generally, they can certainly go after the board of directors for breaching a fiduciary duty, for essentially, making their shares less valuable. But ultimately, I don't think that has a lot of teeth. I don't think they're going to be successful. So we're going to watch this case develop, but this is normal M&A practice with highly sophisticated entities that know the letter of the law and how to comply with it. And some people just get frustrated by it. And I understand it, because if you're a minority shareholder in a publicly traded company, you don't really have a lot of say in what happens in the business, unless it's one of these things that's not carved out in the statute.
So taking this to another extreme, if you will, instead of, let's say for instance, that a company doesn't necessarily do their due diligence, say they might, run the football when they should have taken a knee and they turn it over and all of a sudden the other team scores in that particular case. In this particular instance, with the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, what did the plaintiff need to have happen in order for them to win their case?
They should have. I mean, again, they haven't lost yet, so I shouldn't call it like it's already done.
Yes.
But if it was a 21%, if you said, okay, well, the law says 20% for voting rights, and we're going to give you 25. Well, of course, you're out of luck there. You've made a mistake. So these lawyers that these companies use, like Ridgemont's one of the backers of Omni. I mean, if they found lawyers that didn't do this right, they'd be suing those lawyers for breaching a fiduciary duty, for not following what's supposed to happen. So this is why the due diligence stuff is so important. And for everyone watching, when you get both boards of directors for both companies, the acquirer and the person who's selling, these folks have vested interest in the long-term success of both of their companies. And one of the challenges we've talked about in this litigation is there's going to be the number 2 guy of Ford is going to be a former Omni guy. So there's some uncomfortable, relationships that happen when these big deals take place. But if you are following the letter and you have great lawyers and you have great representation and you have finances to wear with all this stuff, ultimately you're going to be successful. This is a delay of the deal. The judge is likely looking at all of the filings so far and saying, okay, well, really what's going on? So they grant the injunction, say, look, we don't want the deal to happen right now. We're not going to let it happen October 2nd. Now we'll have a hearing on October 11th. We're going to continue to have the stay for a little bit longer. And the judge is going to come out. And my expectation is give it a week or two. And they're going to say, your restraining order is denied. The merger can go forward. The damages to Forward Air are going to be substantial if they have to continue to hold out. I mean, they got a bunch of money on hand to do this deal.
That's
and
true.
If they're going to be on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars a day, you're going to have to make a deal happen.
Absolutely. Lots of hard feelings in this deal there as well. Hopefully they can find an equitable solution at this if this deal does indeed go forward. Matt Leffler, thanks so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Bill. Thanks for having me.